Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, students. We see you again. May we always be happy and prosperous. In this meeting or this session, I will discuss the formulation of public policy. So just a minute, I want to share my PPT. It's about public policy formulation. For the identification of public formulation, an issue will become a public issue when some people or groups move towards action to solve the issue. For example, if there are low-income groups who could accept this condition and not try to improve their status, public issues will not rise. Public issues are issues or problems that have a broad impact and include consequences for people who are not directly involved. This is from Winarno 2007. And the public issues can also be classified into three forms, namely distributive problems, regulatory problems, and redistributive problems. Distributive includes a small number of people that could be handled individually. Regulation, encouraging the emergence of claims failed to limit the actions of other parties. Regulatory issues related to regulations that aim to limit the action of certain parties. And three, redistributive, concerning issues that require change in resources for groups or classes in society. And this is the four key features of policy issues. Interdependence, in the sense that public issues often affect other policy issues, energy issues, for example, can affect health issues, unemployment, and others. This policy issues is part of a whole system of problems called meshes, a system of external conditions that generate dissatisfaction from every community group. And the second is subjective. That is external conditions that give rise to issues are defined, classified, described, and selectively evaluated. The issue itself is objective, but because the policy issues is a product of thinking activity on the environment, the issue is an element of a problematic situation that is abstracted from a particular situation by the analysis. Something experiences is a problematic situation, not the problem itself. This is the artificial. Policy issues can only exist in humans consider the need to change the problematic situation. Policy issues are the outcome of human subjective views. Policy issues are also accepted as valid definitions of objective social condition. On this basis, policy issues are formulated, achieved, and socially changed. And the dynamic. Issues and solutions are in the constant state of change. Therefore, policy issues will never be completely solved. The workaround may become obsolete, even if the issue being solved is not obsolete. And this is the agenda setting. There are many issues of public concern and interest, such as issues of health, education, security, food, pollution, transportation, and others. These issues will be resolved through the public arena. Of course, not all public issues can enter the public agenda. Policymakers such as the executive, legislative, and judicial elites put the issues under their authority onto the public agenda. Public issues condition. Public problem or issue can be developed into a public agenda or government agenda, depending on the extent to which the condition of the problem develops in society. Number one, problem extremity. An issue that is felt to really need a solution. Number 2, problem concentration. If issues from multiple sources will be concentrated in one area. Number 3, scope of the problem. If the issue has a broad impact covering a large number of people. And number 4 is mountain climber problem. The issue will continue to develop after the has been run program turns out to be unable to completely solve the problem. And number 5, agenda setting analogy. Issues that have just emerged are just old issues analogies that have not been successfully resolved. And number 6 is symbol. If the problem relates to national symbols that are considered important and sensitive. And number 7, availability of technology. If there is technology that can be used to solve the problem. And number 8, the absence of private roles. If there is a problem that cannot be solved through market mechanism or the role of the private sector. This is the agenda setting. Agenda setting is an activity to make a public problem into a policy problem. Anderson in Widodo 2007 mentions 5 steps in agenda setting. 1, private problems. 2, public problems. 3, issues. 4, systemic agenda. And 5, institutional agenda. We can discuss one by one. Impact of agenda formation. The formation of the agenda that occurs as a result of the expansion of the issues from the attention of certain group to attention of the wider public depends on three things. This is from Kopp and Elgar in Parson 2005. The first, the more ambiguously an issue is defined, the more likely it is to reach a wider public. Second, the more socially significant the definition of an issue is, the more likely it is to develop into wider public attention. And the third, if an issue is defined as an issue of long-term relevance, it will more likely be exposed to a wider audience. And this is the government agenda. In the next stage, policy issues can develop and enter the government's agenda. The government agenda is a list of issues that public officials pay serious attention to at any given time. This is from Jones in Widodo 2007. The government agenda can be divided into 2 forms. That is the systemic agenda and the institutional agenda. Systemic agenda. Systemic agenda defined as all issues that are generally felt by members of the political community that deserve public attention, and these issues are under the authority of the government. And institutional agenda. Institutional agenda interpreted as a series of problems or issues that explicitly require active and serious consideration from legitimate and authoritative decision makers. And this is the public issue transformation. In relation to the transformation of public issue into policy issues from Jones in Widodo 2007, suggests 3 indicators. The first, the scope and possibility of support. Second, the problem or issue is considered important. And third, there is a possibility that these public problems can be solved. And this is policy issues. Policy issues will be able to enter the government's agenda or systemic if 1, the issue receives widespread attention from the public or raises public awareness. Second, the existence of a broad public perception, view or opinion that a certain action needs to be taken to solve the problem. And third, there is a common perception from the public that the problem is a legitimate obligation and responsibility of the government unit to solve it. And this is a private issues flow. The flow from private issues to institutional agendas can be seen in the picture below. 1. Private issues. Problems that have limited effect or concern only one or a small number of people directly involved. Second, public issues. Problems that have a wider impact include consequences that affect the people who are indirectly involved. And third, political issues. Differences in public opinion about solutions in dealing with problems. And number 4 is systemic agenda. The issue is felt by all members of the political community who deserve public attention, and the issue is within the jurisdiction of the government's authority. And number 5 is institutional agenda, a set of issues that explicitly require active and serious consideration from a legitimate or authoritative decision maker. This is public policy problem formulation. As previously explained, public issue can be transformed into policy issues in order to formulate policy problems correctly and correctly. This is from Patton and Sawicki in 1986, such as 7 states. The first, think about why a symptom is viewed as an issue. Second, define the boundaries of the issue to be solved. Third, collect facts and information related to the problem defined. Fourth, formulate the goals and objectives to be achieved. Fifth, identify label policy envelopes that affect the issue. Sixth, show the costs and benefits of the issue to be solved. 7, formulate policy problems properly. This is the method of making problem formulation. Number 1, boundary analysis, which is an effort to map the problem through snowball sampling from stakeholders. This analysis is faced with unclear and complicated problems, so stakeholder assistance is needed to provide information related to the problems at hand. Second, classification analysis. Classifying problems into certain categories with the aim of facilitating analysis. For example, analysis of job opportunities in the processing industry. And number 3, analysis through brainstorming. This analysis formulates the problem through brainstorming from people who know the existing conditions. 4, multiple perspective analysis, which is a method for obtaining varied views from different perspectives on a problem and its solution. And number 5, benchmarking analysis, which is an effort to identify public issues faced by conducting studies on similar problems in other places or countries. This is from India Hono 2009 and Nawawi in 2009. Public policy formulation model. Number 1 is institutional model. This model implies that making public policy is the responsibility of the government. What the government makes in any way constitutes public policy. Institutionally, the legitimate government has the right to make policies. The weakness of this model is the neglect of the environment in which the policy will be implemented. Number 2 is funnel model. This is from Hoverberg in Parsons 2005. Uses the funnel as a metaphor for the policy process. At the board input section, there are determining factors, while at the end of the funnel, there are institutions and elites that filter and mediate from mass political forces to shape policy outputs. The weakness of this funnel model is that it places less emphasis of the roles of government institutions and elites. This is because the idea of a funnel-shaped policy process regulates the input-output relation in the one direction as well as input as an exogenous force that is processed in black box. This funnel model doesn't allow for interaction between elites and institutions with exogenous forces. And number 3 is about a process model. There is an assumption that politics is an activity, so it has a process. This is from Nugroho 2009. Public policy is a political process that includes the following series of activity. Number 1, problem identification, put forward demands that the government take action. Number 2, setting the policy formulation agenda, deciding that what issues to choose and what problems to raise. Number 3 is policy proposal formulation. Develop policy proposal to address the issues. Number 4 is policy legitimacy. Choose a proposal that is considered the best and then seek political support so that it can be accepted as a law. And number 5 is policy implementation, organizing the bureaucracy, providing service and paying and collecting taxes. And number 6 is policy evaluation, conduct program studies, report outputs, evaluate the impact of target and non-target groups, and provide recommendations for policy improvement. The process model has a weakness, that it doesn't place much emphasis on policy substance. This is a group theory model. This model presupposes policy as a point of balance. The assumption is that interaction in group will result in balance, and balance is the best thing. Individuals in groups interact with others formally or indirectly or indirectly or informally, and directly or indirectly, convey demands to the government to establish the necessary policy. The role of the political system is to manage the conflicts that arise from difference in demands and interests. That is formulating the rules of the game between groups. Number 2, arranging compromises. And number 3, enabling the formation of compromises in public policy. And number 4 is strengthening compromises. This is the picture 6. It's about group theory model. You can see the added influences. So influence of group B, and in the other side is the influence of group A. In the circle, influence of group B is have alternative policy position, policy change, and this is the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium. Okay, we can next model. This is the elite theory model. This theory has the assumption that in society there are elite and mass groups. This theory recognizes that no matter how good and democratic it is, there is always a bias in the formulation of public policies. Because it is recognized that basically the policy that are born are the political preferences of the elites. This is from Nugroho 2009. There are two views in this approach. Positive view, that an elite occupies the top of power because it succeeded in winning the idea of bringing the country to a better condition than competitors. Negative view, that in the end, in the political system, it is the holders of political power who will exercise power according to their tastes, and the people are considered as a group that is deliberately manipulated so as not to enter into public formulation. The weakness of this model is that because elites tend to want to maintain power or status quo, the interests and welfare of the community are often ignored. This is the rationalism theory model. This model puts forward the idea that public policy is a maximum social gain, which means that the government as a policymaker must choose policies that provide optimum benefits to society. This model is based on cost-benefit analysis. This means that the public policy formulation process must be based on decisions that have taken into account the rationality, that is, the comparison between sacrifices and the result obtained. Policy formulation according to this theory is arranged in the following order. Number 1, knowing public preference and trends. Number 2, find options. Number 3, assess the consequences of each choice. Number 4, assessing the sacrifice social value ratio. And number 5, choose the most efficient policy alternative. The weakness of this model is that the concept of maximum social gain varies between interest groups, and the bureaucracy suffers from pathology that is self-serving or self-service. Number 8 is integrated observation model. This model combines the rational model and the incremental model. This is from Nugroho 2009. This model was developed by Etzioni in 1967. He introduced this model as an approach to the formulation of principal and incremental decisions, established the process of formulation of basic and high-level policies that determine the basic guidelines, establishes the process that prepare the main decisions and implement if after the decision is reached. In principle, the integrated observation model is a model that simplifies the problem. In Indonesia, this model is preferred because it is a compromise model, although it is not always effective. During the old order era, Bung Karno, Bung Karno is the first president in Indonesia, might be seen as a policymaker of this model when in controlling power and politics. He introduced the Nasacom policies on nationalism, religion, and communism. The party fusion carried out by Pak Harto. Pak Harto is the second president in Indonesia. During the New Order era can also be seen as the implementation of the integrated observation policy model. And Benin is democratic model, a policy model that involves more stakeholders and the community in decision making, called the democratic model. This model develops in countries that have recently undergone a democratic transition. This model is well applied to create good governance, which allows the target group and policy recipient groups to accommodate their interests. The visualization of this model can be seen in the following figure. This is the figure 9, democratic model. You can see in the left, it's government. The first is policy issue. Policy issue is from civil society. Policy issue, the next policy issue is stakeholders forum. And the next stakeholder forum is policy discussion, policy formulation, and policy approval. Policy approval is from government. And number 10 is strategic model. The strategic approach uses a sequence of strategy formulation as the basis for policy formulation. The same is from Nugroho 2009. Citing the ideas of Olson and Eddy Bryson in 1988, define strategic planning as a disciplined effort to make significant decisions and actions that shape and guide how to be organizations, what organizations do, and why do organizations do such things. Bryson in 1988 believes that strategic planning can help organizations to think strategically and develop effective strategies, clarify the future direction, create priorities, make decisions immediately concerning consequences in the future, develop a coherent and solid foundation for decision formulate, on use maximum discretion in the areas below, organizational control, make decisions that cross levels and functions, solve key organizational problems, deal with rapidly changing circumstances effectively, build group work and expertise. And the strategic formulation process is structured by following the following steps. Initiate and agree on the strategic planning process, understand the benefits of the strategic planning process and develop initial agreements, formulate process guide, clarifying the organization's mandate and mission, which includes the activities of formulating the organization mission and mandate, assess strengths and weakness, as well as opportunities and threats. This process involves the formulation of desired policy outcomes, policy benefits, analysis, and SWOT. Identify strategic issues faced by the organization. This process involves formulating the desired outcomes and benefits of the policy, formulating examples of strategic issues, and describing strategic issues. And the formulate strategies to manage issues. This is from Bryson 1988. And number 11 is game theory model. Game theory is present when the rational model cannot answer the questions raised, which are difficult to explain with the available facts because most of the pieces of facts are hidden. This is from Nugroho 2009. The main idea of game theory is, number 1, policy formulation is in situation of intensive competition. Number 2, the actors are in a situation of non-independent choice. Number 3, game theory models are abstract and deductive in policy formulation. In competitive conditions, the success of policies is not only determined by policy-making actors, but also by other actors. This is the game theory model. There is alternative A1 and alternative A2. And they have alternative B1 and alternative B2 is if the cross-check alternative A1 and alternative B1 is an effect, alternative A2 and alternative B1 yes, they have effect, what the effect, and alternative A1 and alternative B2 they have effect, and alternative A2 and alternative B2 they have effect too. The key concept of game theory is strategy, and what is to be achieved is not the most optimum, but the most secure from the opponent's attack. This theoretical model actually has a high level of conservatism because the strategy adopted is more defensive. And this is the number 12, public choice model. The assumption of the public choice model is that policy is a collective decision formulation process from individuals with an interest in the decision. This is from Nugroho 2009. The policy is rooted in the economic theory of public choice, which presupposes that humans are homo economicus, who have interests that must be satisfied. Buyer meets seller, and supply meets demand are the principles of the public choice model. The public choice policy model is widely used to make policies that are political economy in nature, or even though it is not used for policies that are political economy in nature. The majority of policy analysis deals with economic issues or uses economic consideration. This model has weaknesses, including limited interaction and access to its constituents or supporters. And number 13 is system model. David Easton, who first introduced the system approach by doing an analogy of in systems biology. Biological systems are a process of interaction between living things and the environment, which are ultimately creates the deliberative model or deliberation on the formulation of a relatively stable survival change. This biological system is analogous to Eastern in the life of a political system. In the system approach, there are three components, namely input, process, and output. This is from Nugroho 2009. The system consists of output, and output, the flow of which can be seen in the following figure. This is the picture of system model. The system theory has a weakness, that is, it doesn't include negative variables from the system. And number 14 is the deliberative model. The deliberative model or deliberation in policy formulation was developed by Hajar and Wagner. This model is also known as collaborative policy making. The deliberative model of the public policy process is different from the technocratic model because the role of the policy analysis is only to be a facilitator so that the public can find their own policy decisions. The deliberative approach can be seen in the following figure. This is the figure 11, deliberative model. The first square is environmental public issue, and go to public dialogue. They have policy analysis, and then go to the deliberation decision, and then is public policy. Public policy is from government. And this is the video that you can see example of public policy formulation.
If you want to feed the world in 2050, then the next 40 years we need to produce the same amount of food as we did over the last 8,000 years. And that gives a little bit an indication of the pressure on the food system. We just face a huge challenge with a growing population, with the change in consumption behavior, with the climate crisis. How do you secure your food production? The real secret is the sustainable production. It should be with less inputs, less fertilizer, less pesticides, less water. It needs to be sustainable, otherwise we will destroy our planet. Yeah.
The security of the food system is one of the world's most pressing challenges. But the story of how this small country became an unexpected food superpower might just have some answers for how we tackle it.
Consider this. If everyone on Earth ate the diet of the average American, that would require all the habitable land to be used for agriculture, and we'd still be 38% short. And that's right now. What do we do when there are 2 billion more people? Well, the key is more exciting than it sounds, and that's efficiency. Basically, how do we produce a lot more on the land we're already using and do it using a lot fewer natural resources?
When it comes to sustainable agriculture, one country has seemed to crack the code. Bolstered by a national commitment to produce twice the amount of food with half the resources, the Netherlands has become the world's #2 food exporter.
There was a very close collaboration between the government, science organizations and the industry. And they started out of a common interest. So they say, okay, yeah, we want to go for sustainable production, but everybody was aligned.
Everyone involved in the system was aligned and embraced innovation to reach that shared goal, and that has driven efficiency on a level unmatched anywhere else in the world. If there's one place that approach is most clear, it's in their unrivaled greenhouse growing operations.
There's a very nice example about tomato, which really gives a good insight in how we want to produce our food in a sustainable way. So if you produce tomatoes in an open field situation in Spain, then you will end up at the end of the growing season with 4 kilograms per square meter. If you do this in a high-tech greenhouse in the Netherlands at the moment, you will end up with 80 kilograms per square meter, which is 20 times more. But the best part of the story is that the 80 kilograms of tomatoes, we do it with 4 times less water compared to an open field situation. And water is one of the big challenges that we face. Just had a cup of coffee. Do you know how many liters of water were needed to produce that cup of coffee? Rough guess.
10.
150. So high technology offers really a possibility of producing a lot of food per square meter in a sustainable way.
The Dutch lead the world in tomato yield while using a fraction of the water that other countries use. But it's not just tomatoes. Measured by yield per square mile, they're the world leader in the production of chilies and green peppers and cucumbers. Number 5 for potatoes, onions, and carrots. The list goes on. But the bottom line is they've been able to get so much out of so little.
If we are able to produce 80 times more with 4 times less water, that's great. That's great news, I think.
Most people know that greenhouses allow a grower to tweak every little thing. But the Netherlands is taking it to the next level. They've perfected the greenhouse as the ideal environment to continuously test and implement all kinds of ways to optimize growth. From things as simple as testing what hues of LED lights can increase pest resistance and improve nutritional value, to things as crazy as moth-killing drones.
So at the moment we don't have any products who can control actually the moths, and finally they will produce caterpillars, and those caterpillars can do a lot of harm to many different crops. Well, that drone is able to detect the moth, also to see how it's flying, and then with his wings, propellers, he will crush actually the moth.
Wow.
There's a relentless drive towards innovation to create better and more efficient growing techniques. They've even started taking the human touch completely out of it. Some of the latest tech relies on AI to learn plant behavior and constantly adjust conditions without any input from a farmer.
For example, what we're testing in this compartment is a climate computer. So we have different sensors, and it's actually, we measure the plant activity. And based on the plant activity, the computer is actually controlling the whole climate by itself.
Ultimately, the key to solving our global food challenge isn't just in relying on super efficient food producers to carry the weight for everyone else. It's learning from and adopting that technology. At the World Horti Center, you see that effort firsthand in an ongoing experiment. They've built basically a greenhouse within a greenhouse. Inside the larger structure, they're able to replicate any climate on Earth to figure out what modifications need to be made to realize the same yields they're getting in the Netherlands in any other country on Earth.
We have a cooperative project going on with Colombia, and we can in fact we can emulate the current climate conditions in Colombia, put their crop in and see how crop behaves under the circumstances that we have in Colombia. We can totally flip the seasons around. We can make it a sunny day on Christmas. We can close the curtains on a sunny day and make it completely dark. I think in the long run, the future of the Netherlands should not be to be a producer for the rest of the world. We should be a developer for the rest of the world. We are the country that will export our knowledge on creating production facilities all over the world.
Innovation starts really by bringing all these networks together. In the world we live nowadays, you need to link up with other people. You can't do it on your own. We need to produce more, we need to do it with less inputs, and we need to do it better.
Thanks for watching. If you like the future of food, stay tuned for our new series, Future of Cities. Subscribe to Freethink now to be the first to see new episodes.
If you want to...
Thank you for this meeting, for this material. And this is the end cast with me. So next midterm, after midterm, you see with the other lecturers. Okay, and for the midterm is you can collect that your policy paper that I give you the material, and you give the policy paper like I said before a week before. Okay, I stop share, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.